Hello and welcome to a special Monday night edition of the Scotland Rugby News podcast with me, your host, Bruce Aitchison from Happiness Egg Shaped, and the man from Scotland Rugby News, Gavin Harper. Good evening, sir. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. It's been an interesting weekend, I have to admit. I've done, it's probably the laziest weekend I've had, but I've consumed quite a lot of sport.
Yeah, so have I. Not actually that much rugby, which has made a bit of a difference. But yeah, it's been good. All interesting times as ever. Plenty to talk about again.
And the boys for Kelsey nearly got a podium at the Tour de France.
I know, incredible.
Tell you what, times have changed for pretending you were going to be ET and take off on your BMX. That's for sure. We've quite literally taken a leap in cycling.
Yes, I'm not quite sure how we're a minute in and we've got on to ET and cycling, but yeah, no, great, like amazing for Scottish sport. But look, it's one of them that you hope is something for a catalyst for the kind of future.
Yeah, I do understand cycling. Anyway, we're not here for that. A quick word from our sponsor before we kick off. The Scotland Rugby News podcast is brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV. There are thousands of jobs across Scotland and you can find the one for you, S1 Jobs. So start your search tonight. Lions, let's kick off there. I saw Scott Hastings yesterday morning. We were both watching Scotland women against France women at hockey at Peffer Mill. And the first thing he said to me was, what did you think of the clear out?
Yeah, I mean, like it's been the thing that everybody's debated. If you're a Wallabies fan, you don't like it. If you're a Lions fan, you probably think it's totally fine. I think I saw Nigel Owens getting some fairly interesting comments on his Twitter that I thought were pretty below the belt, pretty personal. But he made the case that it should have been, the Andrea Piardi got it right. It should have been play on, and Hugo Keenan's try should have stood as it did, and the Lions deserve to be 2-0. So I suppose that's a good judge. As a guy who's refed 100 test matches, but look,
I think Wayne Barnes said the same thing. I think Wayne Barnes, maybe in the Times or the Telegraph or one of the papers I didn't read, but I saw the headline. I think he said it was fair.
And I think I understand why Australian fans, and I mean, like, I'm surprised. I'm not surprised that people like Morgan Turinui and the Australian media have gone supersonic on it. I am slightly more surprised that the Australian coaches and team have chosen to be as vocal. And interestingly, the those of us on the Wallabies mailing list, they send out the press conferences for broadcasters to upload, and they use the description, the British and Irish Lions won the series 2-0 after a controversial 79th minute try. And I thought, oh, hang on. We maybe do need rugby to be a bit more punchy, but I'm not necessarily sure we need unions and governing bodies to be the ones throwing the punches. So it'll be interesting to hear what, if anything, comes out of it from World Rugby. I think there maybe is a case for Australia maybe to answer, just in terms of the way they've gone about some of the comments. But for me, I initially thought the way Carlo Tizzano went down, I thought, oh, there's going to be a problem here. This is going to be checked, and we're going to deliberate this forevermore. And here we are talking about it. But I thought it was fine. Having watched it a few times, I thought it was fine. I saw James Haskell actually on his podcast saying I'd have sent Tizzano off for the dive. And I must admit, that doesn't look, the more you watch it and the slower it gets, that doesn't look great, that he sort of throws himself backwards. But Yeah, it was. I think you can, I can understand why people are making a case either way, but for me, it was fine.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that. I'm not sure I buy into that one. I think Scott, as lots of people do when they speak to me and ask me a question, regret asking the question, because I then got right up on my high horse about how stupid the game is. Because Tizzano wasn't in a position that Morgan probably had been in 3 or 4 times in the game. Curry would have been in. A number of players get themselves in that position, and it's nigh on impossible to do anything about it without looking like you've caused some damage or hit. Now, there's no way Morgan could have got any lower than Tizzano without diving on the ground. Now, maybe that means it needs to be a quick whistle because Tizzano's on the ball, but I thought for me it was a clear. It's not a position I want to be in as Tizzano or Morgan because that's what other folk do. That definitely wasn't in my game. But my point to Scott, and this was where we then started on a whole load of other stuff, especially about the game of sevens, but how complicated the game is and how we keep talking about this growing the game, yet we've got such a complicated game where that one incident, you could literally draw a line and have 50% of some of the most knowledgeable rugby people on the planet stood on one side saying it's illegal, and the other 50% stood on the other side going, no, that was fine. And that, to me, is what's come out of that, how big a challenge that is. Forget the new audience and any of those kind of things. You've got people who have grown up in rugby for 100 years and they're disagreeing over that one instance. And for me, that's an issue.
I think that game probably has highlighted two of them. The other one being the Dan Sheehan try, when you can't jump over a tackler, but you can dive to score a try. And in diving for the line, I think there's now a can of worms there around 5-meter tap and go. How does a team now defend a 5-meter tap penalty if the guy's going to get the ball and essentially try and throw himself head first at the try line? It's like that, and I don't understand. And Joe Schmidt was talking about after the game. People now don't understand how you defend that. So if it's causing coaches at that level a problem, you're going to guaranteed when club rugby starts back, somebody's going to try it, and somebody might get a whack in the chin, and that's not a position anybody wants to be in. You're then going to have. I just think that has created a total minefield, and that. I was looking again at Nigel Owens' comments on that, and he was saying that was very 50-50. He could have understood a case for either decision. So, as you say, if you've got people who've been so entrenched in rugby who don't understand it, if you've put the telly on Saturday for the first time, 90,000, or you're one of 90,000 in the MCG, thinking, well, I don't really know a lot about rugby union, but I quite like rugby league. You come away from that absolutely bamboozled by basically the game's two biggest decisions because the laws tie themselves in knots. Hello, Bruce. Have we lost you? We appear to have lost Bruce. Apologies for this, folks. Bruce has vanished. I won't continue rabbiting on by myself. I'll wait for Bruce to rejoin us. So we'll just be a couple of minutes and hopefully we can get him back in. This is clearly his Wi-Fi gremlins have struck again. But we'll be back hopefully in a couple of minutes. Oh, talk of the devil here, hopefully.
I'm back again. Apologies. I had to go for me. I was just reading Matt Williams' view on it. I mean, he's gone talking to supersonic. He's gone absolutely supersonic on it. But I think let's get away from that. The decision was try. It ends up 2-0. You saw how gutted the Aussies were. I'm so pleased that Australia were better. They needed to be better, and for a long time it looked like. I think we all probably thought the Lions were going to come back into it. I don't think any of us thought it was going to be a last play of the game. I think we kind of believed they were going to come back into it and win with a bit more breathing space. But actually, to do it with the last play of the game showed a fair amount. I thought the depth of the squad was decent.
Yeah, I thought the Lions looked like a better balanced team. I think with Porter starting, Genge coming off the bench, Jack Morgan brought a wee bit more than Ben Earl did in the first test. I think you predicted last week and probably several weeks ago, to win a test match, if it's tight, Jamison Gibson Park goes the distance, Finn goes the distance. I don't think anybody had Owen Farrell coming on for Hugh Jones on their bingo card, but he did, and he brought that sort of composure. I thought Blair Kinghorn looked really, really sharp. I think he should start in Sydney. Look, I think Australia were much better. Australia with Valentini and Will Skelton caused the Lions serious problems, and I think we sort of knew they would. We expected that. I think losing the two of them basically in the first 10 minutes of the second half, Alan Alatoa at half-time was a blow. I think they don't have that depth. That Langy Gleeson came on and did an okay job, but wasn't at the same level. Having to play Tate McDermott on the wing, they got caught out by the 6-2 bench. All that kind of stuff played against them, and things probably fell for the Lions in the last 15 minutes that they got back into it. But it was a proper, what a game. And it was sort of befitting of the occasion, I think. And I hope now that the third test doesn't just fizzle out. I've seen a bit of chat about Andy Farrell should basically pick everybody who hasn't had a test cap, and Marcus Smith.
Yeah, I've seen a few of them, and somebody said something to me that they spoke about Finn, and they said Finn Smith's the future, so he should be given a run. Andy Farrell doesn't need to look any further than the ND's notes. Andy Farrell just needs to get to Saturday night, and he's done. He might, who knows what 4 years' time is going to bring. I don't think Andy Farrell is going to dish out test caps. If he was doing that, his boy wouldn't have been on the bench at the weekend, I don't think. I am interested to see what side he picks. I did something on Facebook. I put on the team I think Andy Farrell will pick, and I put on the team that I would pick with my absolute bias involved. Although I did pull myself back for putting Duan in because that is absolutely my bias. But I think there are players you'd like to see Morgan maybe start. I don't know if Curry's wrist is, if you're Curry's club coach, you're maybe on the phone to Andy Farrell going, how is his wrist? Because we didn't need him to be coming back hurt and need an extended break. So I do wonder if things like that might impact your selection. But Andy Farrell, I think you waive your right to Andy Farrell gets to do what Andy Farrell wants.
Absolutely, and I think we have to also be realistic in that perception that, we would love to see. I'm sure I'm not seeing your team, but Ben White, Finn Russell, Sione Tuipulotu, Hugh Jones, Blair Kinghorn, maybe Duhan. I'd love to see Scott Cummings and Pierre, but I think we have to be realistic that if Andy Farrell also thinks, right, well, I want to see Gary Ringrose and Matt Hansen and James Ryan deserves a start. And
that was one of the conversations I had with Scott Hastings yesterday, and we both think he'll pick Ringrose to start because he was going to get his test cap last week. If his head is okay, he will start on Saturday. We agreed with that.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. It's maybe not what I would do, but I think it'll be the choice. I think the interesting one again for me becomes at 12. If Sione is fit, I would like to see Sione get another go. I didn't think Finn and Bundy looked that cohesive at the weekend. I'm not convinced about the wingers. So Matt Hansen, if he's fit, maybe comes in. I think Blair should start. I think Hugo Keenan has done more than enough to merit not only the jersey, but there was. I saw Matt Hansen posting about a statue, which made me laugh.
I saw that. That tickled me. Do you know, on Blair, you said right at the top of this how he looked sharp, and I agree. But Blair adds a lot. He's good in the air. He can kick. He can counter attack. I think there's a lot in Blair's favour for him to start on the wing, although we would all much rather he was at fullback. But as you say, that laddie that scored at the weekend, he's probably done enough to get himself in, and good luck to Andy Farrell dropping him. But I think Blair has got enough to be on the ding-a-ling. I think there's plenty there for him to start there. I will be interested to see what Andy Farrell does with both wingers, because neither of them have really lit the thing up. But then there hasn't been that many opportunities. I watched it on my own on Saturday morning, and I was thinking to myself, similar, I'm not sure Bundy has got enough here, and then he tears up the middle of the park and makes 40 metres, and all of a sudden he gets a little highlight reel moment that but then he seemed to be pulling up with cramp again.
Yeah, I thought that. The other thing that, let's not rule out that Owen Farrell starts at 12. There's every chance the Lions say.
I picked that. I went with Farrell. I think he goes Gibson Park, Russell, Farrell at 12, Ringrose at 13, Blair, Keenan, and then I'm a bit torn as to what he does on the other wing with James Lowe. I think James Lowe probably survives, but I'm not quite sure he's done enough. But I don't think his performances have said pick me in front of anybody else.
I agree, and we've spoken before about Duhan's not a guy who's going to get in on the bench because he only plays one position, even though you've got Farrell and Blair who would see you right through multiples of others. But I think the bench is slightly interesting as well, because if he does go your way and he picks Owen at 12, does he then look at a 10 on the bench, or does Sione become an option for 25 minutes off the bench? Which you could then be looking at Curry.
I don't think he picks a 10 on the bench, especially if he picks Blair Kinghorn, Owen Farrell, and Finn Russell in the 15. I don't think he takes a 10 on the bench. I do wonder if that makes him go 6 and 2, but I don't think he is. I think he would still take Mitchell, which is sad on Ben White, because I think he's done enough. And we saw on Saturday there that, as I said, you play Gibson Park and Russell for 80. So he wasn't going to put Mitchell on, and I think Ben White showed enough in the Tuesday game that you could put him in. But I'm totally biased, so I'm maybe not the person to take on that one.
Yeah, and we are obviously going to look at this through a Scottish lens, but I wondered about this. So Ben White played that Tuesday game and was very good. Was very good in the first game he played, I think, the Waratahs. Alex Mitchell has sat on the bench for the second test, didn't get on. Sat on the bench for the midweek game and didn't get on. So he's only played a handful of minutes since the start of the test series. Does there come a point when you say, actually, this guy's now not match sharp? We're going to make that change because Ben White, in his most recent performance, was better than Alex Mitchell, but also he just has the benefit of having played more recently.
It's a tough call on Alex Mitchell, because
totally. Like,
I would imagine he wanted to play in that Tuesday game, but Ben White, the idea would have been, well, if Gibson Park goes down, you're starting, son. So I get it. It's so tough, but it's the player I feel for, because Alec Mitchell have been desperate to get on the park in both those games, I would imagine, to show himself, and he's just not been allowed to, for whatever Andy Farrell's reasoning. I get the test, I get that, and I quite like that substitutions were made on gut rather than pre-programmed on 65 minutes. We make that change, so I like those things, but and here's me moaning every other week about giving caps away. But now it's a rarity to sit on the bench in a test match and not get a cap. It's an absolute rarity.
Totally. And I think especially for, like, front row don't do it really that often now. But a 9 as well. Like, how often do you see a 9 apart from maybe a Gibson Park or a DuPont go 80 minutes? It's not a, even South Africa, when they've gone 6-2 all these years, and the bomb squad have carried a 9. So it's definitely a rarity. I think the other one, I thought Chesham was good, but I would like, if Joe McCarthy was fit, I'd like to get him back in the 20. I think he deserves another go, which then again probably means Scotty Cummings' chances has gone. I think front row, I was quite surprised actually how sort of emotional Tadhg Furlong seemed after the game. And he spoke about it being like the closing of a chapter in his career, the Lions. And, there's, like, we've talked before about the late, great Tom Smith and his achievements in 97 and 01, starting 6 tests. But Furlong's now looks like he might do 9 in a row, which is obscene for a tight head prop.
But there's a lot in there. Like, you and I, as rugby supporters, let's not pull any punches here. We love the Lions, and even through days where there wasn't really much Scottish about it, we still loved the Lions. And when you see pictures of them coming together, and you see boys, you see Scots and Irish and Welsh being pals with Ellis Genge and Owen Farrell, and you're looking at them going, like, what, like, where's that come from? Like, that's that, but it's such a brilliant thing. I love it. And when you see them come together and you see how much it means, and while I still think a lot of the social media stuff I've not got a lot of time for, and I posted a big long moan again, as I have done a lot in the last 6 weeks. But when they were all sitting having a beer in the middle of the pitch, and I love those things. Like, I think those are great things. And you see boys sitting next to boys that in 6 months' time they'll be knocking 7 colours out each other. But you just know after the game they'll be closer and they'll be mates and they'll share a story. And Tadhg Furlong isn't one of the social media darlings. Like, I didn't know anything about him. I don't think know much about Tadhg Furlong, so we don't know how emotional he is. But to have been that good and be that important, and to people, they've literally built teams around that guy. Like Ellis Genge, somebody said he's like the dad of the tour party. Like, none of us would have seen that coming.
No.
But his stock, I think, really gone up. And although he started on the, when you see how much it means to people like that, and Darcy, we all love, and we hear how much he wanted it, but we all know Darcy's a supporter. He loves all of it. He loves playing for Hawick. He just wants to be involved in the game. And I heard Curry talking, and I liked the way he was talking. It sounds very different from what I expect him to sound like. Talks emotion about it and how important it is. I think it's incredible, and I'll be sad if Scott Cummings doesn't get to call himself a Test Lion, because I think he's been excellent.
Yeah, I do too, and I think I said that and got pelters online because he had a bad game the first game he played, but like since then I think he's been the form locked, apart from McCarthy on the tour. I think he'll be unlucky, and he always maybe was unlikely to sort of force his way in when Marrow was named captain. But like I think he's done enough to get a shot in the 23. I think there's loads of players who might like. There's a clamouring again from the English media. Oh, let's get Pollock at 8. Like that's a total snub to Ben Earl, who should be second choice. Like Pollock, you were talking earlier about it maybe being a 6-2 bench. I think that's the only way Pollock should get in. You look at before the first test, Luke Cowan-Dickie probably is the backup hooker. And then he gets knocked out, concussion, and hasn't featured. Does that sway Andy Farrell to making a change in some way? I think, as you said earlier, he's only got to look as far as the end of his nose. And, 3-0's doesn't happen often. And I think any notion of maybe sentiment picks or horses for courses changes will go right out the window, and they will go absolutely all out to make it 3-0.
Well, absolutely. And, as I said, in 4 years' time, who knows? And Andy Farrell's got a chance, potentially in his one and only Lions tour, to win 3-0. Yep. And if I'm John Dalziel or Easterby or Wiggle or whoever it is, I'm going, no, we're like, this is all on. Like, we're picking what we think is the best team to win this game, and everybody needs to get on the bus and go for it. And I think if Farrell goes 3-0, you would be putting money on him being a Lions coach in 4 years' time.
I think so. I think, having had that experience of being there this year, and with Ireland's trajectory looking pretty good, and you then look at who are the contenders. We've spent a long time talking about Gregor's future and what that might look like. So you say, okay, well, that probably rules him out. Wales is Tandy is going to take over there, but that's a mess. So that rules him out. And then you've got Borthwick. I'm not sure Steve Borthwick is that man yet. So you say, okay, well, if you're going down the route of it being one of the coaches,
yeah, I'm not sure Borthwick, and I don't know. And if he's like Matt Scott will tell you, Borthwick is one of the best coaches ever worked with. But I'm not sure about Borthwick in a short period of time with bringing all those players together. But I don't know. But I do think Andy Farrell, and John Dalziel in 4 years' time, who knows where he'll be. And I would be sad if he was, in 4 years' time, and I think the line out has functioned well. I'd be sad if he wasn't able to, but who knows? He could be head coach at Edinburgh or Glasgow in 4 years' time, and Scottish Rugby are saying, well, like how do we fill that gap? So I don't know. And if Gregor goes, who knows what his backroom team looks like? So there's so many things. So you're going right this Saturday. Let's go for it. Like, we are all in. There's no tomorrow. Let's do our damnedest to be series 3-0.
Yeah, exactly. And for all that we've talked about, all these, Owen Farrell and Furlong and I think Maro will make another tour. But you look at some guys. This is it. This is their last chance to put the jersey on. Finn, who knows where Finn will be in 4 years? This could be his last hurrah in a Lions jersey, and I think those players will want to leave it in the best possible way they can, and that's 3-0. There's one here, back-to-back test series in Australia. I'm pleased that the test series has at least been competitive. I think that's a positive. The tour games have been rubbish, and I think they really need looked at, but I'm pleased the series has been a decent watch, and the Lions deserve to win, which I think is fair.
I think if the tour was in South Africa or New Zealand, the tour games might have been more challenging. I think the state that Australian rugby is in at the moment, the midweek games, or not the midweek games because we've Saturday game, but the games in the run up to the Test series weren't as challenging. I think if that's in New Zealand and you're playing against the franchises, or you're playing against some of the select teams or the Maori, if you're playing the Maori on the Saturday before the first test, that's the fourth test.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
the
absolutely.
Springboks, historically the Springbok, the midweek teams or the warm-up games in South Africa has always been, right, let's see how many Lions we can batter so that they're in a poor state by the time they hit the test series. So I think that would change in 4 years' time.
I think you're absolutely right. What I meant there was, I think they need to look at that for the next time they go back to Australia. I think there's maybe a way you can get Fiji or somebody involved instead of making up teams. Although that the First Nations team gave it a good crack, and look, they want to be part of the calendar going forward. Clearly, that means a lot to them and their heritage. But that AUNZ team was thrown together, and that just didn't work. The Lions would have got far more out of that from playing Fiji, or I think if they then play the franchises, you have to look at, okay, maybe in New Zealand or South Africa, we don't need the fringe international squad players to released, but maybe in Australia, that's where it's different. Maybe you do need the Wallaby squad players to go back and help these kind of franchises out. But I think that's all obviously a talking point for further down the line. But look, I think they'll go and make it 3-0 this weekend, and it'll be party on for Finn and Co in Sydney.
Aye, play Tonga, play Samoa, play Fiji in the run-up to playing Australia, and give and even if they're not full caps, if they're not full Lions caps, but give Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa the chance to play against them. So this week, I think we wait to see what team he does pick. I do have this thought that the only Scots in it are going to be Finn and Blair. I do have a worry. I wonder if it's between Shuggy or Sione to be that bench spot number 23. I would be sad if we ended up like that, because I think the Scottish players have contributed a lot to this Lions tour. But it's Andy Farrell's gig.
Totally agree. I think, let's wait and see what Thursday morning brings when the team's announced. But I just hope there are more than that too, given the chance to put the jersey on again.
Yeah. My weekend viewing kicked off with Scotland women on Friday night. I enjoyed that. Pitch wasn't great, but I think the story we're all excited about, and we'll get to what happened before the game. But so good to see Emma Wassell back playing rugby. So good,
and I was maybe a bit not apprehensive, but a bit interested to see how she carried herself, how she performed, and it was like she'd never been away. I thought she looked like she hit the ground running. I thought there was bits of it that'll need improving, but I think overall from her, couldn't have asked for more. I think it'll be great for her to have got 60 minutes under her belt, in an international. She now knows that she can play at that level again. We spoke to her after the game, and she was obviously emotional about the journey that she's been on. I think there's pictures of Rona Lloyd's family and Rachel Malcolm's family, who've obviously she's become very, very close to since, particularly I think since Emma's mum died. And you forget, not to make light of the comeback from her injury or from the tumor and the surgery, but you forget in amongst it all the journey that she's been on includes all that. Her mum passing away last year, and to have had the kind of have gone through what she's gone through and come back from it is remarkable. But I suppose Brian said a couple of weeks ago that the challenge for her is making sure she does everything to still earn that place in the squad, and I think she probably went a long way to doing that on Friday.
I agree. Do you know who I was really impressed with? I thought Alex Stewart made a massive impact when she came on. She is tiny. I mean, she is not big, but she's got a massive heart. The way she carried and she was busy and she was. I thought Alex Stewart was really good when she came on. She's going to struggle to get a starting spot in front of that back three. Evie, Rachel, and Rachel. I think she'll struggle to start, but I thought she gave some good energy when she came on. I was really impressed.
Yeah, me too. I thought it was obviously an interesting sub because they brought her on before Eva Donaldson came on, and then Rachel Malcolm ended up going into the second row for a bit. And I sort of thought, well, hang on a minute, there's still a lock on the bench. But she did give them a bit more, and actually it was good to see the four of them on the pitch together. I thought that gave them a bit more about the pitch, but they obviously lost a bit, maybe set piece wise. I think, I think Alex Stewart's a really top prospect. I think, as you say, the challenge will be how does she then get in the team. I think the worry for me, and Brian said he was confident that they'll be fit for the World Cup, but they didn't look the same attacking threat with no Fran McGee, no Emma Orr, and obviously Chloe Rowley was on the bench. That's maybe a bit of the worry. I thought Hannah Ramsey was good on her debut. I know she only got a few minutes, but I still think you can't really go into a World Cup with 110 and others who are totally untried. So I'm really interested what they do this weekend and whether Hannah maybe starts or somebody else gets a go at 10 against Ireland, because for me, that is like, that's the glaring position that you say, well, if there's an injury, that becomes a major, major problem.
I am really interested. I'm actually more interested to see what Brian picks this week for Ireland than I am for the Lions, because I don't know how he goes into this game with it being the last chance before the World Cup, and he knows a lot about a lot of the players because they've been there since day one, and he's, they've been in his 23s, if not his 15s. Also talking about depth, it was good to see Evie Wills getting a game. She's been through a lot and went to World Cup, and she's sat on the bench and she's not been able to play. So having Evie Wills get game time was a good thing. You're right, Emma Orr, if we were picking our Lionesses, Emma Orr gets to go. So she comes back in hopefully and makes things good. I thought Corinne Grant struggled a wee. So, and Fran probably is in that slot with Rona on the wings, with Corinne maybe as third choice. I'm not sure, but I do think there is plenty to be going on with, and Ireland is going to be an interesting one, and Ireland will be gunning for it. They'll be looking to go into the World Cup with a bounce. So I'm really interested to see how it goes. Italy were decent and put up a good fight. I liked the way they sort of supported Was and gave it a little bit as well. But I thought it was a good game. Disappointed to lose, but I think there's lots in it for Brian.
Yeah, I do too. I think you look at these games and actually, is there, how much do you read into the result? Probably not that much from that one. I think, though, from a confidence point of view, you don't want to be 0 from 2 going into the World Cup when the first game is your big one. We asked Brian last week, do you plan to give everybody else that's in the wider squad a run ahead of, in this Ireland game, everybody that's not involved? And he said yes, but I'm not massively convinced you can. I think he needs to go quite strong, and that might mean he picks players in the wider squad who haven't played in these warm-up games. And the reality is they might be in, talked about Evie Wills, they might be in Evie Wills' situation from the last World Cup, in that they're in the squad, but the reality is they might not actually play that much, if at all, unless there are injuries.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a great opportunity we can't really talk about Scotland women performance on Friday without talking about what went before it. And you were on the call with Rachel and Brian, and it probably raised eyebrows, but then nothing about Rachel Malcolm's leadership, I think, raises eyebrows for me. She's strong, she's brave, she leads that group not just on the field but in their behaviour, their culture, their ethos. Her and Brian have developed a really strong relationship. Brian has done a lot in his time and had to deal with a lot in his time with that group. So what did you pick out of it? What were the bones of it?
The bones of it for me were that Rachel Malcolm is not particularly happy, and I think rightly so. I think to have had all this talk about contracts and the coaching upheaval, as Rob Robertson's written on the site just now, in the lead up to the biggest tournament in these players' career, can only be detrimental. I think, to have lost Fraser Brown after the Six Nations and then lost Matt Banahan, I was concerned about the route things were going. I'm sure, Ross Miller and Steve Shingler are good coaches, but I'm not, you've in no circumstance would you have a men's World Cup where two of your assistant coaches left within 6 months of the tournament start. It just wouldn't happen, and it shouldn't have been allowed to happen here. These guys should have been secured on contracts at least until the end of the tournament, and then, or even if there was some negotiation with clubs and all that kind of stuff for them to stay. I think that's been a mistake. The contract situation, Rachel Malcolm was look, I think a lot of the time, and I would say this, we media people moan about people giving stock media answers. How many times have we had guests on and you say, don't give us the media answer, give us some honesty? And the two things are night and day. And actually what was nice for us was Rachel was brutally honest, but I think she needed to be. She needed to make people aware that this situation was ongoing. Clearly, their talks with Scottish Rugby have been, as she said, they have been frustrating. I think the more talks she had, the more frustrated she's ended up. And look, I think Scottish Rugby want to bring these players ultimately back to Scotland. I think that is the plan. But I'm not sure this is the time to have sort of attempted to start these contract negotiations when there are players in this squad who have signed deals beyond the end of next season with English clubs. So, look, I think it's a bit of a mess. It's a shame that it's going to overshadow the build-up to this tournament. I hope that Scottish Rugby put a statement out off the back of the Zoom call we did with Rachel and Brian to say that they were still committed to supporting women's rugby and the high performance, that contract negotiations had been completed. I hope that's gone the way it should go, and that investment that they've made continues. I hope that now isn't the time that we say, well, actually, we're going to cut back, or we're going to pull the plug, or we're going to offer contracts to players that are difficult to accept but hard to turn down, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's still an element of you should be grateful. I think what I know of this group, and I know quite a few of them pretty well, and I've been having a bit of chat with some of them over the last while. And they would walk over hot coals for Rachel Malcolm, and they would do that because that's what she does for them. So attitude reflects leadership, as Remember the Titans will tell you. And I love that, and I love how there's an element of, all right, you might not be the best player, but you're the best leader. All right, you might not be the best player, but there's something that you offer, and we can look at the abuse that Owen Farrell's had for the Lions. None of us are in the training field. When Finn Russell, I don't know if he did it deliberately, but he was missing kicks in the warm-up, and Sky said to him, "Oh, you know what was happening?" And he said, "Oh, when Farrell came over to me and just said slow down, and I got my first 5 kicks, the next 5 kicks in the warm-up." None of us are seeing those little moments that Owen Farrell offers, more than just what he does with the ball or what he does when he tackles, or for Mark Palmer's favourite, what he does on both sides of the ball. Rachel Malcolm is leading that team in the team room, in the hotel, on the training field, in the media. Rachel Malcolm is, I'd make her Prime Minister tomorrow if I had my chance. And they all support her, and they want things to go well. So I do think there's an element of we're circling the wagons, folks. Brian, the backroom staff, I know the players rate Shingler and Miller as coaches. They're happy, and both of them are putting in a good shift. I've known Ross since he was a kid. I don't know Shingler at all, but I hear really good things from the players about them. So there's a lot that points towards, right, sleeves up, shoulders back, chest out, let's go for it. It's just us, not necessarily us against the world, but you get what I mean. They've got a tight circle of support. I hope this is the kind of thing that's going to galvanise them into even bigger and better things at the World Cup. And what I will be sad at, if it doesn't go well against Ireland, it will just add to folk piling on. Let's judge them on the World Cup.
You're absolutely right. The World Cup is the tournament that I think we've all said for a long time this team should be judged on. I think, I said before, getting to the last World Cup felt like the achievement. I think now they have to go and perform at this one. I hope this hasn't been a massive, Rachel said it had been a distraction and disruptive and all this kind of stuff. I really hope that if it is sorted now, which we're led to believe, that now at least they can go and concentrate on the rugby and actually give the performances that, because Brian said last week, they've gone from 13th in the world when he took over. They were 5th, they're now 7th. So there's been massive improvements. I know people, rightly or wrongly, look down their nose at women's sport and have opinions about it. That anyway, the point is there have been massive improvements. I think I would like to see those improvements reflected in this World Cup, and I hope that what's gone on in the last few weeks doesn't get in the way of that.
Yeah. No, by the way, it's the wrong view of women's sport. It's just an ignorant view of women's sport. Do not get me started on that one.
I did see your post. Yeah, I saw a post from you earlier. Go on, you go.
I was watching the Lionesses final yesterday with my 2 girls who are soon to be 14 and 16. And I got my eyes opened a little bit. Neither of them are massive football fans, and that's my fault because I take them to Hibs. But the thing I realised in this, growing the game, and I've ranted before about certain access and social media and in the changing rooms and all those kind of things. And my girls could have probably just watched the penalty shootouts and the celebrations, because the game wasn't what interested them. It was the people that interested them. And something you said earlier, and something I say to people when they come on, don't give me the media answer. The reason my 2 were really invested in that Lionesses game yesterday is because they were invested in the people and the characters that were playing, because they listen to the podcast, they watch them on Instagram and TikTok, and they're funny, and they knew so much about the players. They've no idea if they're any good at football, and they were delighted when some of them got off the bench because they're the ones that they follow, and they were delighted when they scored penalty. And then Mo Salah's got about 30 million more followers on Instagram than Liverpool.
Yep.
We would get excited by knowing more and by hearing their stories. And olden days, we knew that because the players, and I'm talking the men's game here, the players were in society, they were in the clubs, they were now. Rugby players are still reasonably accessible, but professional players are much less accessible than the amateur era were. And, you know, people supported those players so much way before social media. The women, I think, have got a lot of support because they are on social media and we get to know them as people. You know, you don't have to be on Instagram long for seeing what coffee shop Emma Wassell was in or what holiday Rachel Malcolm's on. But it gives you a window into who they are as people. It's much tougher in the men's game, and they're so scared. A lot of players are so scared to say anything, and that's where when you get a Lions tour and you get this, you know, them trying to recreate the '97 Living with the Lions, but still on a watered down version, we start to like people like Ellis Genge a bit more. We start to, and that engages people. I don't know where I'm going with this rant, but I really like that this Women's World Cup is bringing the likes of Lona Marr to the shores. That England team, I think, are going to be rock stars when they win this Women's World Cup, and they're not going to get the same level as the Lionesses, but they're going to be made much closer to household names, and I love that. And I think we're in a really important summer for women's sport, women's rugby.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I think one of the frustrations, certainly from my point of view, would be that maybe that storytelling point of, you know, allow people like me to speak to as many of the players as we possibly can and tell their stories, and not the conversation not be directed by the game at 3:00 on Saturday afternoon. The conversation be directed by the person sitting in front of you, not necessarily the rugby player, the person who's been through that journey and what that journey's looked like. And, you know, I think there needs to be more of that, because still the sort of coverage is not at the level that it maybe could or should be. But I think there has to be more of a way in than just, here's 80 minutes of rugby and discuss. You know, I think that's where that audience growth still needs to happen. That I think governing bodies and players themselves can still do more to say, look, I am going to put my hand up. I am willing to tell my story. I understand the value in this for me, but also for Scotland Rugby News or other brands to get a player talking about a specific issue or to tell their own story. I think it's where women's rugby is at in Scotland, particularly at the minute. And I think that's certainly for me a big kind of work on. But yeah, we'll wait and see. I think that was a bit of a tangent, but
And
let's hope Ireland.
A lot of those women have. It was.
Let's hope Ireland goes well, and yeah, well, I'm sure we'll be back in due course to discuss World Cup and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Loved it, big fella, and I've come back down off my high horse now, so I'm safe and got my feet on solid ground. We're going to be taking a bit of holiday, folks, as we disappear. So nothing next week after the third Lions test, although we might get excited and do something. So we'll be back the week of August the 11th to talk wash up Lions, wash up whatever, look ahead to the Women's World Cup, start talking about the new domestic season. There's going to be heaps. Let's face it. It's pretty relentless. It is non-stop. A final word from our sponsor. Scotland Rugby News Podcast was brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV tonight. There are thousands of jobs on there across Scotland, and you can find the one for you at S1 Jobs. So start your search tonight. Gav, enjoy your week. Enjoy Scotland Island. Enjoy the Lions finishing up. There'll be plenty for you to scribble about. And look forward to seeing you soon, my man. See you in August.
See you in August, and enjoy your holiday.
Aye, yeah, I'll have plenty of time to consider my thoughts.